I want to tell you about a word I grew up with. The word is mensch. If you're not familiar with it, it comes from Yiddish, and the Yiddish comes from German. It simply means human. But in the way I grew up hearing it, being called a mensch was high praise. It meant you were a good person, you were empathetic, kind, respectful, someone who showed up. And showing up meant something pretty specific. You got up in the morning, you went to school, you studied hard, not knowledge just for the sake of knowledge, but because one day you need to get a good job and support a family, be a productive member of society, pay your taxes, get married, have kids, send them to school. Rinse and repeat. Being a mensch, at least the way my generation understood it, was inseparable from being a provider. Your value was in your ability to take care of the people who depended on you. And that goes all the way back to the jungle philosophy I talked about in episode 1. There's not much difference between taking out a bison with a bow and killing it in the boardroom. It's all fighting for survival and measuring the man or the woman by the ability to perform. I never questioned that framework. Most of us have built our lives on it. And then, not long after I released the first episode of the Human Precipice, I came across something on Reddit that caught my attention. Now, I know Reddit is not exactly the most credible place for hard facts, but if you can fight your way through the armies of bots and find some real people, every once in a while you'll see something worth taking note of. This was from a user called Wolfgang996938 in the Futurology subreddit. I admit, a guilty reading pleasure. Wolfgang wrote, I feel like I'm training my own replacement. I work in a high performance environment and we've been using AI to become more efficient. And it's got me thinking, if intelligence is now so abundant, then what's my edge as a human? At what point does using AI to be more efficient turn into making yourself redundant? Towards the end of the post, Wolfgang said they weren't looking for hype or fear takes, just real observations for people in the thick of it. I read that and I thought, well, this person is asking a question my entire upbringing really never prepared me for. What's my edge as a human? What am I when the thing that made me a mensch, providing, producing, performing, is being done by a machine? Millions of people are sitting with this question right now, and there are very few people giving real answers. The fear expressed by Wolfgang is not irrational. Even while there's still plenty of skeptics out there thinking AI is a fad or so overhyped that it's all about to come crashing down, there are also real college grads unable to find jobs, real graphic designers looking for work, and real programmers wondering if this paycheck's the last paycheck they're ever going to get. I don't have statistics on this, but I'd bet you $1 that if you cornered any junior associate at just about any law firm, assuming you can get an honest answer out of them, a huge majority would tell you their billable hours have nosedived, even as the firm's total billable hours may have gone up. Well, how is that possible? The type of work the associates have always done is being supplemented with AI if it's not replacing the junior associates entirely. Meanwhile, up the seniority ladder in those same firms, they have an entirely new swimming pool to party in. They're billing heavy hours advising clients on AI compliance and governance and AI licensing and exposure. So the associates are basically screwed even as the partners are litigating copyright laws as it relates to generative AI and questions of infringement. They're doing just fine. There is some irony in that somewhere, at least for now. Working with AI in a professional capacity, I'm seeing this kind of thing happen in real time. Seeing roles transformed and timelines compressed. And yes, the reality is there are certain skills that have become less valuable almost overnight. Tasks that used to take a team days can now be done by one person in hours. That's not a prediction, that's happening now. So when someone says, I feel like I'm training my own replacement, I can't dismiss that. I've sat at my desk wondering if these tools keep getting smarter, what exactly do I become? I was just working on a project last week, automating a complex product costing function. And I wondered why I was even bothering when in a month or two I may be able to generate the same outcome with a one line prompt, rather than spend days building a deployable program. The knowledge of what's coming tomorrow almost stopped me from doing what I needed to get done today. So, what's the answer to this feeling that we're all so easily replaced? Well, I can tell you what you'll find in just about every LinkedIn thread and career advice column. They're all suggesting you learn a trade, become more entrepreneurial, or learn to work alongside AI depending on what stage of your career you're in. These answers aren't wrong, but they are incomplete and they don't solve for the long term. I'm not saying that you should expect Sparky the robot to show up at your door anytime soon to fix a leaky faucet. We're not ready for that. The dexterity and judgment, the contextual awareness required for that kind of skilled work remains one of the harder problems in robotics. The economics of deploying a $50,000 machine for a $200 plumbing job probably doesn't make sense. But at some point, and here's a recurring theme, probably sooner than most people think, we will see fleets of corporately owned humanoids moving purposefully down sidewalks on their way to assigned tasks. Sounds like a science fiction fantasy, but it's a logical endpoint of the production ramp that we're already seeing underway. If you go back just a few years ago to 2022, there were only a couple hundred humanoid robots being built worldwide on an annual basis, and almost all of those were research prototypes. It was only in 2024 that purpose built AI foundation models were first loaded into humanoid robots, giving them the ability to reason and adapt and learn. By 2036, just 10 years from now, annual production is projected to exceed well over 1 million units. The tradesman's edge over the lawyer or the financial analyst, it's real, and it does buy time, but it's still borrowed time. I know it may sound crazy to some of you, but nobody alive today can train for a career with confidence that that career will exist in its current form by the time they hit their peak earning years. That's genuinely unprecedented in human history. Every answer to how do I stay relevant, whether it's from a career coach or a billionaire CEO, is still answering the same underlying question: how do I stay useful? How do I keep my seat at the table? What makes me worth keeping around? This goes back again to the jungle philosophy I talked about in episode 1. It's all about measuring your value by what you produce. And for most of human history, that framework held up just fine. There was always something only humans could do. There was always a new skill to learn, a new role to fill, and someone willing to pay for your labor. AI is the first technology that threatens that entire way of thinking. Any of the frontier models today, Gemini, Claude, ChatGPT, they're already operating at PhD levels in many domains. They're faster, and they can do their work 24/7 without a break. The experts can debate whether or not we've reached artificial general intelligence or not. But the direction is clear, and it is accelerating. We're headed towards a world in which there will be little to no value in human labor as we currently define it. So, what does that mean to my self worth? To yours? When intelligence itself becomes so abundant and cheap, when a machine can write and analyze, design, code, diagnose, strategize, then a civilization that measures human worth by output doesn't just have an economic problem. This is a complete collapse of the framework. If you are what you do, and that's how you define what it is to be a mensch, and a machine can do what you do, then what are you? That's not a thought experiment. For more and more people, this is a question that really needs to be considered now. I don't want to be the guy sitting here comfortably telling people to find their inner light while they're worried about paying rent. The system we live in, where your health care is tied to your job and your dignity is tied to your paycheck, where your worth is measured by productivity, that system is real. And we can't meditate our way out of it or take a deep inner journey to find your mortgage payment at the end of a yellow brick road. I want to have the conversation about who we are beyond our jobs. But most of us are asking, how do I keep my job so my family eats? So here's what I'd like us to think about. This system, the one that ties our value to our output, this is now the problem. It is the jungle philosophy. You are what you produce. You're the worth that the market says you're worth. Okay, the lack of job security is nothing new. We've always lived in a world in which you could be replaced by someone better, especially if they were cheaper. Entire production infrastructures have moved from country to country for this reason. But this is different. We can't just accept that billions of people become worthless because we can't outperform a machine. Maybe we need to start asking whether the way we measure human value is now fundamentally broken. Maybe it was broken all along. And this is where it gets spiritual. Whether you want to use the word or not, that's up to you. But underneath the disruption and the efficiency gains and all the career anxiety, what AI is really doing is forcing us to surface an ancient question. What are we for? What is the purpose of a human being? Every tradition on the planet has an answer to this question, and almost none of them say, oh, your purpose is to be productive. They talk about consciousness and connection and compassion and responsibility to each other, the inner life, the soul, or whatever you want to call it. We've spent the last century or so systematically burying those answers under a mountain of productivity metrics, quarterly earnings, and career ladders. We've convinced ourselves that you are your resume. That is your worth. The rest, laziness and, I don't know, ambition is the only virtue, apparently. And now along comes a machine that can outproduce us, and suddenly we're terrified. Not just because we're losing jobs, but because we're losing what it meant to be a mensch. We're losing the story we've told ourselves all along about why we matter. And here's where I know I might lose some people, but I think it needs to be said. What if this isn't just a crisis, but also an invitation of sorts? What if machines taking over the work that we were never meant to have confused with our identity to begin with is exactly the disruption we need? Not just the economic disruption, but an even greater spiritual disruption. We've been on this treadmill for so long. We've forgotten that we're allowed to step off and ask, why am I running? In the last episode, I talked about the jungle philosophy, the idea that even in a world of abundance, we're still hoarding, we're still competing, driven by fear and scarcity, still living like we're in the jungle when in many ways we have made it. Here's the personal version of the jungle philosophy. I am what I produce. I am my title. I am my salary. I'm whatever edge I have over the next guy. And AI is walking up to that story and saying, really? Is that all you are? Look, I can't pretend to have the only answer, and anybody who suggests they have an answer for all of this, they're full of shit. I can't tell you how to fix a system that measures human value by output when the machines are about to outproduce us in just about every domain. That's a civilizational problem, and it's coming, and we are not ready for it. But I can tell you this: the people who'll be most devastated by this shift, not just economically, but existentially, they're the ones who've rarely, if ever, considered their real worth beyond productivity. And the people who navigate this moment with something like grace, they won't necessarily be the ones with the best prompt engineering skills or the most AI certifications. And yeah, I know it sounds hokey, but I believe it. It'll be about their capacity to love, our capacity to love, to be present, to find meaning in something other than output, to see the person next to us and to actually care about them more than we care about ourselves. To notice, to really see the miracles of being alive and conscious in a universe that didn't have to include either of these things. And yeah, I know that doesn't solve next month's rent, and I'm not pretending it does. But the Redditor who wrote that post wasn't really asking about how to upskill. They were asking, what's my edge as a human? Well, your edge as a human is your humanity. And if that sounds obvious, well, ask yourself, when was the last time you actually invested in it? When did you think about what it meant to be a mensch? The world's going to keep telling us to adapt and to upskill, to stay competitive, and we must. I'm not saying quit your job and go find yourself a mountaintop somewhere. But if the only question we're asking is, how do I stay relevant? We're asking an incomplete question. We're asking, how do we keep running on a treadmill that's about to be unplugged? How do we keep living in the jungle? The better question and the harder question is, who am I when the machine can do my job? What do I actually care about? What makes me worth knowing, not just worth hiring? This is what I mean when I say the existential threat isn't AI, it's us. It's what happens when we face this mirror and have nothing to show for ourselves except for a resume, a list of those things we've been useful for. The answer to that Redditor's question, what's my edge as a human? It can't be found in career guides. It is found in the oldest questions we've ever asked. Questions about meaning, about purpose, about what we owe each other and what kind of people we want to become. AI didn't create these questions, but it's certainly making it impossible to ignore them. And maybe that's the most important thing AI brings to us, and the most frightening: a mirror. I almost forgot to mention that while you've been listening to my voice, my words, the image you're seeing on screen is a virtual clone of Gil Paul. Now, this just allows me to focus more on the words and the meaning behind them and just worry less about the lighting and the framing of the video. So maybe next time, but until then, I just wanted to thank you for joining me on the second episode of The Human Precipice. Thanks so much.